you think about technology, disruption, they are the centerpiece of every single thing that's going on in the world.
Artificial intelligence is an unstoppable trend that you, me, everyone needs to get more familiar with. To get a primer on AI, I've asked my friend Stephen McBride to join us from Dublin, Ireland. He's the chief analyst at research firm RiskHedge. Stephen, I always love getting together with you, and you recently wrote something that really hit me. You wrote that coders using a software tool tied to ChatGPT were completing tasks in 55% less time. And that was kind of the start of the aha moment for me. When it started to come together, I started to realize this isn't just going to be about coders or programmers. As AI systems get released, as more bespoke tools are developed, this is going to affect almost every industry, and it's going to go fast. Do you agree with that assessment? Is that what your thinking is?
Yeah, I mean, one of my all-time favorite Mark Andreessen quotes is there's going to be two kinds of people in the world. People who tell computers what to do and people who are told by computers what to do. Just to your point about the 50, this new, it's called Copilot, the tool that you mentioned, by Microsoft. It helps coders complete tasks in 55% less time. And I think Tesla's head of engineering, he says Copilot now writes 80% of the code for him. It's almost like kind of writers getting the first draft out of the way and then going in and editing it. To your point about Copilot for every single industry, right? Accountants and lawyers and editors and so on. I think that's what's coming. You're already seeing it. PwC signed a deal to give their 4,000 lawyers access to a new tool called Harvey that does exactly that. It automates a lot of the grunt work, right? And you didn't go to law school to kind of write up legal drafts, right? You did it to win cases and provide value for your clients. I think that's an interesting way to think about what's going on. Since the kind of arc of technology is that it allows humans to move up the value stack and focus on more important problems, more value add problems. I mean, 70% of Americans, I think, worked on a farm in 1900. Now it's less than, I think, 2%. Yet America produces more food than ever before. That's how I like to think about what's going on here. If you look at the productivity numbers for America, GDP is really just working age population plus productivity, right? That's what goes into economic growth. Total factor productivity, I think, from the end of World War II through to the 1970s, grew about 2% a year. Since 2005, we're growing at 0.2% a year. Okay, so this is one of the reasons, and I know we'll just get into the risks and the dangers later. That's one of the reasons why I think America and really every country should embrace AI. If there's a possibility that gets us back to 2% a year productivity growth, that is your way out of all the problems that we think about today, the debt and the demographics and all that stuff. So it's almost more of a risk not to focus on it.
Yeah, agreed. I really have come to believe that this is going to turn into just an absolute explosion in productivity. You probably know who said this first. There's a quote going around to the effect of, AI won't take your job, but someone using AI will.
Yeah, I don't know who said it, but I agree with it. And I'm sure you've read Tyler Cohen's The Age of Average is Over. And, the thesis of that book is you want to upskill and you want to kind of focus on really, really valuable things because globalization has, increased the competition pool. The way I think about that is AI is the next leg of this. And average in the AI age is people who do not use AI. So all the studies now, and it's really interesting what they're finding is people who we're not great coders or we're not great editors. When they use AI, they get a bigger boost than the 10x coder or the 10x editor. So this is really the new age is you have to find out how to use these tools in your own business. whether you're a lawyer, an accountant, whatever. These are really general purpose tools. It's kind of like, you know, you as a firm, you wanted to set up a website back in the day or have an app or whatever. This is really the next version of this.
So can you help people understand what other industries you think could be on the near horizon that are going to be impacted by AI? You know, we talked about law, accounting, programming for sure. What else? Is medicine going to be impacted?
Yeah, so I think this really gets at the fundamental misunderstanding a lot of people have about AI. People talk about it in the singular, right? AI, whereas in reality, there's many AIs. They all do different things. So, you know, the AI that is going to drive your car is not the AI that detects cancer, which is not the AI that can help you write articles. My mental model is it's software that automates a process that could previously only be done by humans. When I think about, we talked about the productivity boom and how this can really move the needle for America specifically, because I think America is going to be the country that embraces this the most. I always keep coming back to healthcare and education. Maybe we can throw up the chart later for viewers, but I love that. I think it's from the AEI Institute. It's the price increases and the price decreases of about 15 goods since 2000, and the cost of tellies and all these consumer goods has gone way down, and the cost of healthcare and education has gone way, way up. And you could argue that the quality has in some cases improved, but certainly in the education, has it really changed in 50 years? I'd argue not. I think AI can help us finally break into these industries. If you look at healthcare specifically, I think it was researchers from Harvard Medical School and the University of Copenhagen. They recently built an AI tool which successfully identified people at risk of pancreatic cancer 3 years before they were diagnosed with it. Again, pancreatic cancer, 95% of people who get it die because it's detected so late. So that is one area where you could see massive breakthroughs. And there's other medical image AI companies that are really doing this for every vertical. Another one is in drug discovery. So I think the average price of researching and developing a new drug today is like $1 billion or $2 billion, something crazy, and it can take up to 15 years. Well, the thing about AI is that you can ingest mind-bending amounts of data and, kind of simulate molecules adding together. You can speed up the time it takes and the cost it takes to develop these drugs. So I think there's 19 AI drugs in the pipeline today, up from 0 a couple of years ago. Again, this can really move the needle if it's allowed to. And the other one is what I call the paperwork problem. So the amount of administrators working at American hospitals is up 35x since I think 1970. And some studies have found for every hour doctors spend with patients, they do 2 hours of paperwork. I saw this myself visiting my grandmother in hospital last year. It's like being time warped back into the 1980s or something like that. There's just paper everywhere. A lot of the systems aren't even on computers. AI can help with this, right? There's already companies that are basically have Alexa-like devices that sit in doctor's office. They annotate all the conversations that are taking place, and they send, whether it's prescribed medicine or whatever, through to the pharmacy, just automating that process so the doctor then does not have to sit there for 2 hours writing out exactly what happened. The other big one, as I said, education. There was a study in the 1980s. It was called Bloom's 2 Sigma problem. And basically, the researcher looked and said, how can we best improve children's outcomes? Okay. And he found one-on-one tutoring was by far the best predictor of better outcomes. Basically, it took your child from the 50th percentile average to the 98th percentile, which is exceptional. But of course, we don't all have money to get one-on-one tutors for our kids. Just wasn't possible before. With AI, you make that possible. Okay. You can have an AI that has interacted with your child from birth knows maybe they're a little slow on math, but they're great on English. And now Khan Academy, Duolingo is doing something similar. They're building super tutors. You can think about it, that you can sit in a classroom and you can be on something like an iPad or another device, and it can interact with you one-on-one, and it knows exactly what you're good at, where you're lagging. Hey, let's do 2 extra hours of math this week. So this is a real game changer. I mean, you just think about, I don't think anyone is completely happy with the education system today. This could completely change the game, especially for lower income households. Now, the big question in my mind when I talk about this, Ed, and just back to the chart I referenced earlier, is technology going to be allowed to flourish in these industries, right? Because I've been reading about health tech and ed tech for 10 years, yet nothing really changes. And when you look at these industries, it's not for want of trying. It's because technology has essentially been outlawed in these industries. Joe Lonsdale, Palantir co-founder, who I think you interviewed at a strategic investment conference recently, he had a great story about this, that his friend was a doctor in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he tried to introduce some technology into the business to automate processes, make the business better. He would have been able to see supposedly 10x more clients. He wasn't allowed to make those changes because of the American Medical Association. So that's the real question here. Is technology going to be allowed to flourish in these industries? I hope it is. And if it is, we have a real shot at breaking down America's 2 most broken industries.
That's really interesting. As you've been talking, I've started to think about just who might be at risk. I mean, you mentioned administration in hospitals. Education is rife. If you know any teacher, they'll tell you that they're outnumbered by administrators in the U.S. education system at every level, from elementary to high school, straight through to higher education. And then I start thinking about, boy, what could the impact be on government? I mean, if you start to think about applying AI to routine tasks and paperwork, and I mean, the headcount in government could drop dramatically. The impacts are going to be, I think, a lot bigger than most people are realizing at this point. Do you see AI as a job taker? Because I'm starting to come around to Kathy Wood's argument of AI actually being deflationary. Hard to imagine in this inflationary environment that we're in, but I'm starting to see the other side of that argument.
Yeah, look, I mean, I have studied this deeply, I've thought about it deeply, and I keep coming back to the fact that no technology in history has caused mass unemployment. Now, that's a numbers game. There's going to be some jobs that go away. Like you said, there's going to be a lot more jobs that are created. MIT paper, I think, it found 60% of employment, as in people working in 2018, 60% of those jobs did not exist in 1940. So that kind of gets at the fact that this technology will create more jobs than it displaces. Another one that I love to cite is 270 occupations in the 1950 US Census. Just one has been completely automated away, which is the elevator operator. And just think about how much the economy has changed since then. Yeah, technology has continued to provide jobs. One thing it's always hard to see what jobs that we're going to create. It's kind of, as you said, you look at the administrators in college, you look at maybe bloated government, and you say, man, those jobs, they're going to go away. It's much harder to think about the jobs, to imagine the jobs that are going to be created, because you have to imagine those jobs. One thing I would cite very early on is that you might have heard of prompt engineers. They're basically people who get the most out of AI. They know how to ask AI the right questions and get the exact right answers. Those guys, they're earning 6-figure salaries, and that job did not exist 2 or 3 years ago. Like, I mean, imagine telling someone, hey, I'm earning $200,000 talking to a chatbot. They would have called you crazy. Yet that's going to happen. And there will be many more of those along the way. One thing I would say is that you really want to, having studied the history of this stuff, again, I'll go back to the Industrial Revolution. Before the Industrial Revolution, skilled artisans, they made everything by hand. And then, of course, machines and factories and all this stuff came along, and low-paid labor, people unskilled, were doing their jobs 20 or 30 years later. Yet employment in that industry went way, way up, simply because demand for clothing and other goods went way, way up. Similarly, during the heyday of Detroit, when Henry Ford introduced the assembly line, auto employment 10x, I think, over the next 40 years. And again, you would have said the assembly line, that should put every one of these out of work, because it made it way more productive. I think it reduced the time to make a car from 12 hours to 90 minutes. Again, just because demand for cars grew so much faster, the employment went up. So when you're thinking about jobs that will be displaced and maybe jobs that will thrive, you really want to focus on those in areas where you can say productivity is going to go up, but demand is going to go up way, way faster. So maybe if it becomes cheaper and faster to write software, the world's demand for software will just go up that much more, that those jobs are fine. So that's the dividing line, I think, about when you think about which jobs will be safe and those will be displaced.
Okay, great point. So there's another side to the coin. So one of the things that you've written about is that everybody needs to get some exposure to AI. They need to start understanding how it works and how to incorporate it into their professional lives and maybe even their personal lives. So give me an idea of how somebody watching today could do that. How can they start to experiment with AI?
Sure. So two main kind of avenues right now. You have ChatGPT, which is built by OpenAI, and you have Microsoft Bing, which is essentially the same technology but integrated into a Microsoft search engine. So if you open Microsoft's browser, Microsoft Edge, you can access Microsoft Bing through that, and it kind of pops up on a sidebar. And then any website you're reading, say you want to go on and you want to read a scientific paper on whatever that is, you can post a link to that paper in the sidebar and say, hey, you summarize this 100-word dense academic paper for me into 5 key summary points. So I've spent
Wow.
I've spent endless amounts of time reading white papers over the years and all this stuff, and it's mind-numbing, right? So I found it does 90% of the work in 99% less time. Another thing that you can do, especially with the latest version of ChatGPT, which is GPT-4, it can handle up to 25,000 words at one point. Again, you're reading a dense article, or you just even a small book, you can post the whole text into ChatGPT, and again, hey, summarize it in 5 sentences for me, please, and it will spit that out. And if you don't like the answer, you can ask a follow-up questions. Break down point number 1 for me more. Explain it like I'm 5. Explain it in the voice of an expert. So there's many, many things you can do. I know a lot of investors, are followers of yours, Ed. One thing that we've started experimenting with at RiskHedge is using it to analyze earnings calls. Okay, so as I said, you can post the transcript of an earnings call and the Q&A into ChatGPT and ask it to summarize the main points, what stood out, what should I ignore, all that type of stuff. And this is it's an amazing productivity tool. It allows you to do more with a lot less.
How comfortable are you chirping off some of that type of work? Because there's money on the line depending on what your conclusions are. How much do you trust it? Do you find that you can teach it to illuminate what you specifically are looking for? How does that look?
We've started playing around with it in with stuff we've already written about or earnings calls that we've already listened to, simply to see you have to check its work, right? It's really like it's a junior analyst, right? Just like a junior analyst comes to you and he says, hey, I read the earnings transcript and here's the 5 main bullet points. You kind of want to check his work. So that's really how we're thinking about it today. It does hallucinate still. Hallucination. Like if you ask Microsoft Bing sometimes, like, why is Nvidia stock down year to date? It's up 170% or something. It will give you an answer of why it's down year to date. So there's still, it's rough around the edges. The key, Ed, is that again, it does 80 or 90% of the work in 99% less time. And just to put a fine point on this, you can criticize it today, but just remember, this is the worst AI is ever going to be. It's only going to get better. So, we're talking about using it here. Now is the time to use it, right? Now is the time. It's like using the internet when it was clunky and it was janky back in the early 90s.
Sure.
Get to grips with it. It's only going to improve.
Any tips or tricks that you have? Because I know several people. Just yesterday, a friend of mine, I actually share an office with him. He was mentioning that he tried out Chat GPT, asked it a few questions, wasn't really that impressed with the answers, and sort of wrote it off. And I thought to myself, you probably didn't ask the right questions. So what is important to know when you start to play around with it?
Yeah, look, it's like any other technology, right? You really have to learn. You have to spend time with it. Two things that I would encourage people to do is, well, first of all, you need to, the key is learning how to prompt. So if nobody, if anyone watching hasn't played around with it, it's essentially a search bar that you type queries into and it spits the answer back out. That's called a prompt. And the key to interacting with this stuff is learning how to prompt. So, one example I like to give is that if you're a high school student and you're tasked with writing an essay about the Vietnam War, you don't write a generic question like, hey, write me an essay about the Vietnam War, because it's going to spit out a generic answer that's kind of not good. And just to spend a little moment on explaining how this stuff works, GPT and Bing and other large language models, they're essentially scanning the whole internet. They're taking, in this example, everything that's ever been written or spoken about with the Vietnam War and coming up with a kind of an average answer to deal with that. Okay. Well, instead of just asking it something very generic, you want to ask it, be specific. So write a 500-word essay about the Vietnam War in the style of an American soldier that's fighting on the battlefield in the Mekong Delta for the first time ever, and he's pinned down. Be specific with your answers, whether that can be for anything. It's really drill down and be specific. And I'd also mention you can ask it follow-up questions. If you don't get what you want, ask it to simplify something. Ask it to elaborate on something. It's a conversation, right? And over time, you will figure out how to use this stuff. The other one that I've really found that has helped me is ask it to almost role play or play a persona. So again, if you want to know what causes inflation, don't ask, hey, GPT, what causes inflation? Maybe play the role of an expert. So, hey, GPT, in the style of Milton Friedman or Keynes or whatever, tell me what the underlying causes of inflation are in 1,000 words. And again, I've found asking it in the style of an expert really helps improve the quality of the answers.
Interesting. Okay, so far we've talked about kind of all the positives and the fun side of AI, but there's a dark side too. I mean, you've got people heavily involved in AI, Sam Altman, Elon Musk. You've got people who really are deep into it and have been for years, talking about risks and saying it needs to be regulated. How do you regulate something like this? Can you regulate something like this?
So I think it's too early to regulate. I think Sam Altman is very smart talking about regulation, because if you think about the battle of the last maybe 5 years with big tech companies, they kind of shied away and ignored the government. Sam Altman is doing the complete opposite, asking for regulation. Okay, so he's kind of coming to the table first, if you will. It's too early to regulate it, simply because you think about how could you have regulated the internet in 1990? We didn't know how Amazon was going to flourish, or Google, or Facebook. Similarly, how could you have regulated the iPhone or the app market in 2007 or 2008 when Uber didn't exist or Airbnb didn't exist and all those type of things? I think the best thing to do from a policy perspective is to take a hands-off approach, give it a couple of years, see how the chips fall, see what type of apps are developed here. That's the key, because you can't know ahead of time what's going to come out of this stuff. I really think policymakers should do exactly what they did with the internet, which is to kind of give it a safe harbor. And of course, the Communications Decency Act in 1996, I think Section 230 was in there and allowed Google and Facebook and these companies to eventually flourish. And it's not a coincidence that America won the internet vis-a-vis the rest of the world, simply because they were the ones that took a hands-off approach. You look at the amount of, good paying jobs. Of course, there's downsides, but the good paying jobs, the amount of shareholder value that's been created there. So I think it's too early to regulate it. And I'll be honest with you, do we expect good regulation, smart regulation from, the people that have brought us the student loan crisis and $30 trillion in debt and kind of botched the COVID response? I think you want to be very smart about this and not stymie future innovation.
I appreciate the opinion, and I'm sympathetic to it. There's not much agreement on this topic. I was listening to the All In podcast couple of weeks ago, and those guys had just kind of a knockdown, drag out brawl over how to regulate it. Should it be regulated? Each one taking a different side, from full on regulation right through to let's let it play out. So it's going to be a real challenge, I think. But let's move on. I before we get to the end of this conversation, I want to congratulate you because at the end of the day, you're an equity analyst. You're looking for companies with the potential to disrupt industries, and you have held Nvidia, which is so far the number one winner of AI. You've held that for 3 years. So I want to talk a little bit about how you got into Nvidia. Like, what was the thesis that brought you to it? Was it AI way back then? What did you find disruptive about it? Tell me a little bit about your process.
We originally started exploring Nvidia 5 years ago. I actually wrote an article saying if I could buy one stock for the next 5 years, Nvidia would be it. I'm a long time semiconductor fan. I found them the most fascinating things in the world. And they're really you think about technology, disruption, they are the centerpiece of every single thing that's going on in the world. And that's what really, back then we talked about it in the sense of machine learning and video games and self-driving cars, which is really a subset of AI. And it was really all running on Nvidia GPUs. We added it to the portfolio 3 years ago. And, Ed, people watching this might think I'm super bullish on AI, and I am. But I'm coming from a place of AI skepticism, because for a long time, people talked about AI. I mean, AI, the term, was invented in 1954 in Dartmouth, and back then there was predictions about in 3 to 5 years we'll have a computer that can do everything a human can do. In the 1950s we envisioned humanoid robots, and that didn't come to pass. But really, we saw back in 2012 early AI researchers, they started to play around with Nvidia GPUs, and they made a series of breakthroughs. First in ImageNet, which essentially let a computer recognize pictures of cats and other images. And that was really, Nvidia fell into this industry. Those chips were created to make better graphics on your PlayStation, and now they're being used to power every every AI system in the world. So yeah, the original thesis was AI, and we looked at this and we said, there's kind of like, people know Moore's law or Metcalfe's law. There's a new AI law that's emerging, and it's essentially when you 10x the amount of data that you put into these models, you 2x the quality. So what has happened as a result of that is that you get larger and larger and larger models. So Moore's law, I think it doubled every 24 months. The amount of AI, the amount of data going into these AI systems is doubling every 6 months. I think it's up 1 million X over the past decade. So this whole thing, it just requires more and more and more GPUs, which is exactly what Nvidia makes. When you look at its business, it's really been transformed in the last 5 years or so. So I think when, a couple of years ago, 30% of the sales were from data center AI related. Now it's 60% or so. So I think obviously it hit the $1 trillion mark. It's incredibly impressive. It was a lot easier to own it back then than it is now. I still think it has room to run. It almost feels contrarian to buy it here. And when you think about, from doing research into if it's OpenAI, if it's Midjourney, if it's Stability, everyone is just clamoring for as many GPUs as they can get their hands on. And when you think about the chip exports, it's almost like GPUs are the new weapons of mass destruction, right? WMDs. They're trying to limit this stuff. It's incredible how important they have come. But bringing it back to how investors should think about this, I think it still has room to run. One thing that I'm looking for is almost a story signal of maybe when to sell. I'm struck by how many times a hot IPO marks the top of a specific market. So AOL Time Warner merger in 2000, I think it was, that kind of marked the top. Glencore or Blackstone going public in 2007 marked the top of real estate. Glencore going public in 2011 marked the commodities top. It looks like Coinbase IPO marked the top for crypto so far. Maybe OpenAI, maybe Anthropic, one of those hot private AI companies. Maybe that's the time, that's the thing you should look for when to sell Nvidia. But as of right now, all that money chasing, those dollars, institutional, retail, chasing AI, wanting to allocate to AI, there's really only one stock that you can buy right now. So,
I can't resist one last, I always have to bring some geopolitics or macro into the conversation. You said one thing, you said that Nvidia makes the products. I don't think that's the case, right? Nvidia designs and develops, they're an engineering company, but where are their chips actually fabricated?
Yeah, TSMC in Taiwan.
Okay.
Look, I've listened to Louis Gav and Marco Popic and geopolitical experts, people that know a lot more about this stuff than me. They put the risks of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan very low. There's many reasons that they talk about this stuff, but one is to just, on a 5 or 10 year timescale, look at what the Chinese did in Hong Kong, and it was essentially to move Chinese nationals in and over time, take over the country. It's not an all-out invasion, TSMC seems to be kind of building fabs in America. It's looking to do so in Europe now. So maybe that diversifies the risk a little bit. But yeah, as of right now, Taiwan is a very important centerpiece in this operation, which, investors, of course, do your own due diligence. But TSMC is an interesting stock in this all as well, because it's the only company in the world that can make these cutting edge chips.
If you want to know why I brought up where Nvidia's chips are manufactured, check out this video that I recorded with Washington, D.C. lobbyist Bruce Melman last week. We cover the United States' addiction to all things China and why that is going to be a hard addiction to break.